Okay, so you can see right here, we're going to go ahead and deal with the big details, which is the sort of blue material we have here. And we can go over here and we can see this is our actual rotary. But the rotary, if you take a look at it, the rotary has a very unique texture to it. And this is why you got to really get close to your materials to see what they look like. So he has this kind of specular kind of leather type height information. So it's got a bumpiness to it, and that creates this sort of leathery feel to it. And then you have the handle itself. The handle itself is metallic, but it's still very diffused as far as the roughness. So, and it's a white color as well. So, does it feel metallic-y or does it feel plasticky? And that's where that's where you can dial in your metal amount. Again, Toy Story versus a metal bar. That's the Toy Story toy versus a metal bar is what I always kind of compare the two. And then we'll put in these details a little bit later on. But for now, we got to look at the big general details throughout this whole process. So let's go ahead and jump into Substance Painter. And I would say that the rotary's general attributes look very similar to this material we just created. The edge mirror like side. So I can right click this and say duplicate layer. And obviously when you duplicate it, it does carry the mask with it. So I'm going to right click here on the mask and say remove mask. And now I'm going to take this and dump it into the rotary folder so it stays within there. There we go. So now we have the edge mirror-like material, right? And over here in the rotary, we have the material that's very similar. So again, I like to jump into iRay real quick. Always take a quick look into iRay. And we have that going, but we don't have that nice leathery look that we want, right? It's too smooth in here. So how can we kind of do that? Well, let's go ahead and just play around with some textures in here for the height map. So we currently have color and height, roughness and color. I can go ahead and click on the height information, and the height information can either take this information of height, or it can actually take an actual map. So let's go ahead and kind of look at a little menu of the things we do have available here. We do have procedurals, and we can kind of look down for maybe leather. Let's take a look and see if we got some leather in here. We got grunge too. There's a lot of grunge maps in here that you can go crazy with. Let's see if I can find like a leather. And let's okay. So we got procedurals, and then you have procedurals. You have a little bit more control over. There's many different things you can do with them. Like for instance, I'll just grab this metallic grading, right? And I'll throw it into the height information. And you can see right here that we have this ridiculous detail here. In here, and you can play with the scale of this. Again, you probably want to set this projection to triplanar, and then you're going to take the scale and increase it like that. You can see obviously it's going to look real dark here, too much, so I can go ahead and take the actual height information, and you can see there's a couple options. You have position contrast, the tiling. You can bring up the tiling in here, and then you can take the position. And the position will play with the intensity here. The position almost looks like it's like extruding it. It's almost like an exposure issue there. You can see it kind of, it's not necessarily the depth information is increasing. It's just that it's sort of like a layer kind of moving through, kind of like when you put your hand on those little pin toys with a series of pins. And then the contrast will actually adjust the amount of intensity of the map. So changing the position and the contrast will kind of play with the intensities here. And there's a lot to stuff. Some of these have more like rotate by 40 degrees on and off. So you can have a nice formation like that. But we're not looking for that. We're looking for something more, it is what it is. Now you can come in here, I believe you can set this so that you get a bigger size. So I think one of them is here. Let's see. You can change the actual physical size of these squares. Here we go. So you can have medium or you can have large. Large allows you to kind of get a better idea as far as the size of these things. So you can it's very hard to read some of this, but if you hover over it, you can kind of start to see the granularity pattern there. And again, I'm going to go to textures really quick. Let's go to textures. Not textures. Let's try grunges and see if we can find a leather. So again, I'll just come in here. Nope. Let's see here. I'm pretty sure we had like a leather material, unless they took it out in the latest version here. Again, just take a look at it. Does that look like the kind of texture that we had? And see, here we go, grunge leather. Right, so we're starting to get that leathery look. Grunge, let's see here. Yeah, you're going to have to look under grunge and then the word leather, maybe. Let's see here, kind of annoying. I'm not seeing anything that matches too well here. Play around, though. I mean, it's great to experiment with these things. If you don't know what they are, you'll never know when you got to look for them again. And you're kind of like, well, do we have anything like that? Or do I have to find a tileable file to import in here that I can use as a sort of like a grunge map? So we could try this grunge folds. Let's try that out. So I'll go ahead and drag that in and give it a second to update. Let's see here. Okay, so there it is. And obviously you can play with the UV scale, but it starts to give itself away, obviously. I'm trying to look for some heavy noise, though. I think it's the, yeah, let's try fractal sum. And you can go ahead and change the, let's see here. Again, I'll take the scale, bring the scale very high. You can start to see the pattern. See how you can start to see the nasty pattern that kind of builds up there. And again, you could do triplanar projection, or you could try just regular UV projection. You could get different results. So let's see if we can find something that is decent here. This looks like the kind of pattern we had on the ground, so we'll kind of play with that a little bit. These are all, they kind of like put let's see black and white spots here. Let's see if we can kind of play with that. Yeah, it's still too much here. Let's see, position. Yeah, this stuff can be a pain in the rear end to kind of get going here. Let's try this here. Okay, so again, it's kind of hard to, let's go histogram position here. Distance, more disorder here. And your height information, as you can see, you know, the position itself. You can change that up. Let's see histogram contrast here. It seems like it's pretty intense, and we need to deal with that here. Also, keep in mind the quality of what you're looking at. You might see the resolution will depend on how much detail you actually physically see in here. So keep that in mind. So let's go ahead and poke around for a little bit more here. I'm going to go back to my, let's go back to my grunges here. See if I can find a grunge map that looks kind of noisy but leathery. So here's grunge leather. See how that looks. And again, I could come in here and take the scale and bring the scale back to maybe like 4 or something like that. You can see it's very crunchy. This is what I call salt and pepper. When you see stuff that looks like it was burned to a crisp by a nuclear bomb, then you got a problem, obviously. In this case, the balance, you can kind of play with the balance a little bit. And you can start to see how the balance is like an exposure. It kind of reveals the gunk, but you can see here it's not very uniform. And then your contrast, you're going to play with that a little bit. So I'm struggling with this, and there's nothing going on. Here's where the solution can be kind of placed in. I'll go ahead and take my UV scale, and what I'm trying to do is dull down the intensity of that leathery type look. You can see it's still too much. I still need let me try grunge folds. It's just there's not. Yeah, this is very tricky. Let's see here. It'd be nice if they had their own sort of opacity here. They don't really have it in here. Again, I can add contract, but that's going to add more depth. So here's what you can do. You can actually add a filter to this. So with this layer selected, you can come up here and say add levels. And with level selected, you say, what affected channel do I want to affect on this? Well, I only want to affect the height information. And this gives you your atypical input and output based levels. So what I can do is I can start playing with the black point, the white point here, and start dulling down the information here. See if I can kind of, there we go. So I can start crushing the values. You can see here. Play with the midpoint a little bit. You can start getting some results. Yeah, this might not be the best texture for this. Let's do, you can also hit auto and it'll kind of like auto set this up, but still you gotta have an issue here where you're kind of, see what I'm trying to do is get like an intensity like that. You see it has that granularity, but it's not super sharp. And then I can come back to this and take my UV scale and start to bring it up. So now the more you bring it up, obviously you start to notice a repeated pattern, but you start getting something that looks halfway decent, right? So again, I'll leave the levels on like that. I'll have to play with them, but I'm going to try different options here. Let's see what else we got here. This grunge rough cast looks pretty good. Let's try that out. Ooh, yeah, that's much nicer. All right, so then if I need to go back in here, I can come over here to my actual rotary here, right? Click on this, not the mask obviously of the group, but the actual edge mirror like side here. Go to the levels and play around with the levels. Bring back the intensity a little bit. Bring up the scale a little bit. So I definitely do want to get some scale. And again, it has that kind of reality there. It just doesn't look good. Let's see, random noise mode. Rotation variance. That's still a repeated pattern. And yeah, it's okay. So let's quickly just jump into never judge things in here. Always go into your iRay. And now you can start to see the truth here. You can see it's a little bit too much. And this is a great example of what happens when you work on things and you're kind of like, you start to see that repeated pattern, which is unprofessional. See that repeated pattern going on there? Plus the resolution isn't holding up too well. That could be the resolution of your file. 4K might not have enough UV space here for this little piece here, but that's all right. We can keep kind of plugging away at this. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this off. And I'm just going to poke around a little bit, see if I find something. Let's see here. And you can try these other big details and try to shrink them down. Like I take this Grunge 004 and put that in. And then I could take the scale, right, start to bring that back. And you can see what I'm talking about here is it's just the scale size is so big. And we can go ahead and, we can go back to UV projection and go to UV scale here. You can see no matter what we do, the scale is never big enough. So I need to find a really noisy mask in here for this. Again, I'll go back to my procedurals. And just a general granular, almost like static, like right here. This is a perfect example here. This is a Dirt 3. There we go. That's more like it. So now, because there's more noise in here, more frequency of noise, it's not big details. They're more micro details than big macro details. Like an example of macro details would be like this, and micro details would be a heavy noise in here, which almost looks like salt and pepper. But when it's translated on this image here, you can see that when I bring up the scale, we don't see that weird uniform pattern, right? And now I can go back here to my levels height and just play around with this maybe a little bit. Bring back that intensity. There we go. And now again, I'm going to jump into iRay real quick. And I'm going to leave this for now. And we'll play with it a little bit later. So again, you always go back to your reference. I would say that is way too bright. So let's go ahead and take a look at the reality here. So I'm going to go back into the material itself. And we're going to play a little bit here with the actual roughness. So you can see the roughness is set to 0.3. I'm going to be bringing that up until it gets pretty dull. Probably about a 0.6 should be. And it's not metal, so I'm not going to turn on metal. It still has that plasticky feel to it. Let's go ahead and see how that looks. That looks a little bit less obnoxious. I probably could increase the scale of my granularity. That's a little bit too much. Let's try that right now. And again, I'll come back to my rotary or material here, take the scale. And again, scale is a double-edged sword. The more you increase it, the more you'll see the pattern. But it'll look a little bit better. So let me go ahead and just jump back in. Yeah, you can start to see the pattern repeating. See it? So yeah, it's kind of a double-edged sword there. But from a distance, it doesn't look too bad, but you can definitely tell there's some granularity. and so forth. So let's talk about this handle, and we'll go back into our materials again here, our collage of goodies here. And again, you can look at your collage if you wish. Let's see if I can take a look here. And yeah, it has that look to it. Again, look at the comparison here. And it's a little bit, obviously a little bit brighter, but the sun is hitting this, so I'm not too worried about. There is a definite green tinge to everything, so that's something I might kind of put in at the last minute, but I'm getting the base materials kind of set up in here, and that's looking about right. Again, the scale's way off. I need to do more of a scale and not have that repeated pattern in there. And it's a little bit tricky, but in general, it's looking pretty good. Now, for the handle itself, you can see it's metallic, but it's very diffused, hence it's very rough metallic, right? And it's white. So let's go ahead and create a new material for that. So again, I'm just going to come over here to my rotary handle, and let's go ahead and create a new fill layer. And I'll call this the rotary base. And I'm going to drop that into the folder, which is the rotary handle. And once again, I'm just going to go ahead. The color is like a general white right now. And I want to go ahead and turn off height. I'm just going to use color, roughness, and metallic. There is no bumpiness on it, so I'm not going to do height. But there is a metallic feel to it, so I'm going to add a little bit of metal, but I'm going to increase the roughness. And you can see now it's starting to look more like the reality. Again, jump into your iRay and see how it looks. And it's looking really nice. Again, I'm not happy with this, obviously. It just isn't working, but this is looking good. Again, you could feel the resolution. If you feel it, this feels good in resolution. This doesn't feel good in resolution. This feels like it's blurred, blobular blur. It could be the UV layout of this piece. Might not have enough UV space in the actual reality. Or it might not be. I mean, you can go ahead and take a look here in your map. And I love about this material here is we're able to, this is what you're seeing is the material render in the UV space. So any bumpiness is actually kind of rendered in here. So I'm guessing, see if I can find it here. And I'll just turn this, a good way to find things in the UV space is just take the actual, let's go back here to the rotary itself, and I can turn this layer on and off. You can see it's symbolizing this area here, right? So I'll just zoom up right there, and you could physically see the bumpiness? It's actually showing up. It's like they took this render, all the lighting interpretation, and it kind of shows it in the material layout. And always, like I mentioned before, you can come in here and hit the letter C and go through your different options. So you could see the height information. Here's the base normal information. Here's the height information. Here's the roughness information. Here's the, I can't read what that is. But anyway, here's the normal plus height plus base normal. And you'll notice, even though we were painting in height information, the actual baking of the height information is not in the height channel. It's currently being baked into the actual normal channel. So keep that in mind. Even though we've been painting in the height information, right, it eventually gets baked into the normal map. So height and normal gets baked into the normal map, right? So you can see here, this is normal plus height plus base normal, right? So let's go ahead and show you really quick. So here is, even though you can't see it really well, there is color information in here, different color information between black and white. It's so subtle, but it's a little bit of depth. And then here, you can see nothing there. And if we go to normal map, nothing there, right? Because we haven't painted normal maps yet. But here is normal plus height plus base normal. So this is a combination of this, but it'll be baked into your final normal map. So I know it's kind of confusing, so I'm going to hit the letter M to go back here and take a look. But I do like the fact that you can physically see that. Now let's talk about the final material we're going to kind of play with here, which is this blue area that I want to kind of lay out. And you got to ask yourself, you know, how far does that material go out? And we're probably going to do a projection on that as far as a masking. But again, what I like to do is just start with a general material through the whole thing. So again, I'm going to go ahead and come to, let's find the, let's see here, the garbage bin itself, right? That would be this material. And I'm going to go ahead and add a new fill material, like that. And let's go ahead and give this some details. So there's no height information. There's no, there might be metallic and roughness. I don't know yet. But again, let's go back to our reference always. Right? And you can see that this is, let's see if I can choose a better layout here. There we go. I'm going to get really close in on this stuff. You can see our scale's way off. Look how small this stuff is. It's crazy small. Go ahead and jump back here to... There we go. It feels ever so slightly metallic, but not so much. Okay, there is a slight metallic reality to this. And it does, to a certain degree, kind of push out a little bit. You can see how it's kind of pushing out just a hair. So we'll deal with that maybe a little bit later. We'll add maybe some height information. But for now, I want to just deal with the actual color itself, which is this blue. So what I can do is I'll go ahead and hit pause here. And I just gave some room here to show this color that I can sample on here. And I'm going to take the color information here, click on it, and use this little dabber and left click and hold just hold until I get that blue color there. Nice quick way to sample it and get it. So again, we got this blue plasticky feel to it, right? When I know this is probably not as rough and it's got some metallic feel to it, right? So you can go pretty crazy with this. I don't want to go too crazy. And then the roughness I can maybe dial down. So if we go ahead and take a look at the way this is, probably not that shiny, so I'll bring the roughness up a little bit. And I'm holding, again, shift and right mouse button to kind of have this kind of peruse around the material and just see how it looks. And it's looking pretty good. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Okay, so with that said, we got to mask this to just this specific area very easily. So I'm going to go ahead and come into this fill layer. First off, put it in the garbage bin. And we'll go ahead and put this to the top. So I'm going to make sure I just drag it till I get the line, not the square, but the line. And we get it on top. And again, I want to jump into my orthographic view. So I'll go to my orthographic view. I'll go ahead and drag this out now since I don't need to deal with the sign here. Holding down Shift and Alt and clicking and getting zoomed in here like this. Okay. Again, I will go back to my reference and see where does this cut off. Obviously, it cuts off at the top here, and it goes about as low as this little rotor, this little piece here. Okay. So it's basically, if we were to look at the reference, we're kind of grabbing this area right here. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in here. And let's go ahead and do another mask. Again, I'm going to jump into projection mode, which we're currently in. And I'm going to go ahead and create a mask. So again, just click on here and say add black mask. And we'll go ahead and give this a name, obviously, this material. We'll call this the blue, receptacle or blue hole or whatever. I guess we can call it blue hole. And go to the mask, and then we're going to go ahead again. And in this case, I think I'm going to go ahead and take the alpha shape, turn it off, so I get a square shape. And I'll go ahead and hold down Control, right mouse button, and drag until I get roughly the size of where I want this to be. And I would say it's probably going to be right about there, right? So I'm going to click here, click once, hold down Shift and Control, and drag across. And it looks like we're getting a weird artifact here. I'm not sure what's going on. That's odd. Let's go ahead and click this again. Actually, I'll hit undo. Huh. That's a bit strange. Seems like I'm having a hard time getting a projection here. Let's turn on backface culling and let's maybe kind of leave that. Something weird going on here. Let's go ahead and undo this. This could be a normal issue. You can see as I'm painting, I can't seem to paint this area here. That's very strange. Let me switch this to tangent wrap. Let's see if that'll do it. Nope. Now, here's a situation maybe I want to paint in UV space. It might be a normals issue. So you can see here I have the actual thing here, so I can go ahead and just put this to UV space and just click. I'll go ahead and undo all this. Again, undo's your friend. And I can click here, hold down Shift and Control, and drag across. And again, I'm gonna have to do that one more time here. It's gonna be a bit tricky. Seems like it's having a hard time. There we go. There we go. So I'm not sure why it did that, but it actually works for us because the inside of this should be black, as you can see. The inside of this material should be relatively what it is. Now I do have a projection going on back there. Let's find out where that's at. Let's see if we can see that somewhere in our UV layout here, probably in these little circles and so forth. It's hard to see. Again, the way you can figure this stuff out is just click this on and off. You can see what's been painted. And over here is probably a perfect example. This is where you can go to your erase brush. And we can kind of paint that out in the UV space. It's a perfect use, like I said. And again, find out where the artifacts are by just clicking this on and off. I'm looking for any changes here. And it's looking pretty good, actually. And I probably would want this to remain black because the inside, if you take a look at the reference, you can't see inside here. We're kind of faking this. And I can add a material. This is supposed to be perfectly thin, but I had to extrude it, as you can see. So let's go ahead and take a look at what this looks like inside of Iray really quick. So I'm going to go ahead and do Iray. And back it up. And again, slowly but surely, but again, go back to your reference. You could see, did I go farther down enough? You could see in this case I didn't, right? And I didn't go further out enough, right? So you can kind of say, like, Matt, you got to get a little bit further in, and you got to get a little bit further down. So you would just go back in and redo that. So again, I would come to this mask. I would right-click and say, clear mask, right? Move back in again. Go into my projection mode. Make this brush a little bit bigger. I really want to get along that edge as best I can. Close as I can. Click once. Let's see here. It should be, make sure I'm painting on the thing, and click and hold across. That's odd. Oh, you know what? I think we're back on. Let's go back here to UV mode. So alignment UV mode. And I'm just going to paint across here. Again, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. Get it in there as tight as possible. There we go. That's looking more solid, as you can see. And we are, again, I'll just come out of the masking mode here. And we are right on the money pretty much. So you really want to be very precise on that. And then you could kind of ask yourself, we'll talk about kind of creating that indent. As you can see in here, there is sort of an indent goes in and then comes out. That kind of, it looks like a button that's kind of, you know, pulled down and pulled up. So we'll talk about that in a later lesson. But we've got, the only final thing we might want to fiddle with is this little strip here, which is our, so we can kind of see if it's on here or not. We have the hinge, right? Which is this here. So I'll go ahead and hold down Alt and show you. So that's that little guy right there. So what is that going to be? We can probably set up a base material right now of metal. So again, I'll just come over here to the hinge and create another fill layer. Again, we're just adding fill layers and getting the basic overview going on here. So I'm going to put this into the hinge. I'll call this the hinge metal. With the hinge metal, I'm going to go ahead and not use, I will use height eventually. So I'll leave height on. Roughness, let's do metallic. It is very metallic, very chromy. And let's go ahead and take a look. The base color is, in our case, probably like grayish, like that. And the roughness is not very rough at all. It's very metallic, right? So if we were to jump into, kind of see, we are seeing reflections in there. Let's see if we jump into Iray real quick and take a look. So this should have the reflections of the atmosphere in it. I'm not sure why it's not showing up here. And there it is. So we should have 100% metallic, very little rough. Base color, if we put that to black, let's see if it starts reflecting. It should be reflecting, I don't know why it's not. That's odd. Well, for now, we'll just put the base color up to kind of grayish here to match the others. And let's just take a look and see what we got here. And I think we're starting to see the reflections going on in there of the actual scene itself. I can change my environment map to something different. Like I could try this here. You can see, yeah, see the reflection is happening in there. It's like a mirror type material. And again, if you want to take a look at it, you can see right here, this is what we're mimicking. And what we're mimicking has little dashes across, right, little lines. So can we create that in the roughness? Can we create that in the height information? Well, do we have any sort of divider line setups here, like stripes that go across? Let's take a look. And you could say this checkerboard would probably be a good example. So maybe if we add a checkerboard into the height information, actually no, let's not do height. Let's do this brick, procedural brick, and I'll throw it into the height information. And this allows us to have a lot of details as far as the gaps and so forth. And already you can see it. You guys see that? So I can come in here with the number X and bring that down. And the number Y and bring that down. See if I can increase this here. You'll see the gap in X, gap in Y. I can increase the gap there. And we'll do the number of Y here. There we go. So we're getting a bump, but it's every other like that. So we have to kind of change up the amount of gap here. So you can I'm just going to play a little bit here. There we go. So I'm starting to get a general pattern here. It looks like number Y is what we're looking for here. And now we're getting that. Now this is where we might want to take an inverse. So it creates a divot inside. And these are the default settings. You can kind of read the numbers here if you're curious. And that's what I get. So I'm going to increase the Y here to some numbers. So we get a whole bunch of divots there. And it looks like we're only getting it in the center maybe, but that's actually okay. I'm not kind of having a heart attack about that. But let's go ahead and jump into Iray real quick and see what we got. So I'll go to Iray. And now you can see we got that nice feel. I might have to add a couple more divisions here. You can see that these are pretty heavily divided, so I'll add some more into the Y. This is the little details that you really want to get going. So for the number Y, instead of 20, I'll crank this up even more to like maybe 30. And see what we got here. Yeah, that's looking better. Maybe 40. Oh, you can't go any more? Oh, you punks. Why? That's pretty dumb. Let's see. I can also do a bevel here. Yeah, it's kind of annoying. I can't believe they don't allow you to go any higher than that. Well, all right. Well, I guess we're going to stick with 20 for now. And again, the good news is you can take this height information and duplicate it into an offset. In fact, let's go ahead and do that before we end this lesson because this video is getting a little bit late here. Is I can duplicate this layer. Check this out. Duplicate the layer. And this one I'm going to go ahead and turn off color, metallic, and roughness, just so that this be a height-based map, right? So I'll call this hinge added height. And I will come in here and just do this offset. So you have an offset here. So I can offset this. See if I can kind of play with that a little bit. And it should be I should offset it. I'm not sure if it's not doing it. Let's try. Yeah, so you can see I'm changing this up, but I'm not getting a true offset here. That's kind of stupid. Okay. Well, in this one you have UV scale. So if I want to, maybe there we go. So if I increase the scale from 3 to maybe 6, there we go. So we've doubled it up, and we're good to go. This is the creative reality of things you need to do in this program. So you can see now this looks more like my reference. See that? And if it's too shiny, then bring it down. We could also dull this with dirt yet. So just because things are shiny now, don't be like, oh crap, it's too shiny, it's standing out. But it's looking very, very good. Again, we're going to deal with the bevel need here, this nasty texture, but I want you guys to get this far. And this will be, again, if a milestone, if there is no other videos for the week. So you might have to keep going, I don't know.